All right, I'm Jessica, and I'm a person in long-term recovery. And what that means for me is that I have not used any mind-altering substances since June 23rd, 2009. So 12 years, a little over 12 years today. And I usually say what life was like, what happened, and what life is like now. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on what life was like because I'm sure each and every one of you know what life can be like in active addiction. The most important thing to me is that there's hope and there's help. And so I think speaking more to what happened and what life's like now is a lot more important. But in my story, it's really important that I share a few things about my upbringing to help give context and how impactful my higher power has been in my life today. And so I grew up in a family that always had a roof over my head. I always had clothes on my back, always had food on the table. To an outsider or someone who didn't know our family very well, we were well-to-do. We never wanted for anything. I can remember asking for gifts for Christmas, and I got them. Not saying that to toot my horn, but I think to the natural community, we looked like we were fine. But I had two parents who struggled with addiction. And I had a mom who got clean when I was 4, and a dad who got clean when I was 14. And so I had a lot of alcohol and drug use in my life growing up, and a lot of it was close to home. I had parents who used, and then grandparents and uncles and aunts and cousins and just extended family that it was normalized. I had family in and out of jail and the prison system. I had chaos. I had learned to grow. It was normal to be in chaos and how to function in chaos and not to have any kind of reaction to that. Or so I thought. I wasn't having a reaction to that. But I learned to adapt. And I have one full sister, and she's a little over 4 years older than I am. And she played mom a lot throughout my life. And my parents didn't get along very well, and so they split up when I was 9. And I can remember being relieved at that and thinking, oh gosh, there's that one extra bit of chaos that I don't have to function in at 9 years old. And so my sister really took on that motherly role for me at that point in time, and I learned to stuff my feelings. And I learned how to keep it together in school because that's what mattered. And so I was driven by bits of accomplishment and success. And if I did well, if I got good grades, if I, on the outside, looked like I had it all together, we were good. But if I rocked the boat and had moments of time that might have looked poorly upon the family, that was frowned upon, and that caused drama. And so I learned to keep what happened at home to myself. And so unfortunately, though, when I was about 14, the drug use that was still happening in my life kind of exposed itself. And my father entered recovery at that point in time. But unfortunately, all of the instability that I had experienced and the chaos and just the drama, it left like a foundational bit within me that I didn't know how to fix. And I'll say it was a void. I don't know what it would be called, but I had this feeling I can remember, gosh, since I was little, that I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. I wasn't confident unless I was achieving something, unless others noticed that I was doing good. And so About 14 was the time that I entered high school, which was the time my dad was getting clean. And I had already kind of dibbled and dabbled with alcohol and pot up until that point. And when I say alcohol was normal in my life, like, we got little bottles of alcohol in our stockings when I was like 14 or 15. At New Year's, it was okay when the adults were having a party and drinking. It was okay for me to drink also. I remember being little, I'm going to say maybe 9 or 10, and getting a bottle of sour apple pucker on New Year's, so I was just like everyone else. That's not normal. But to me, that's what I grew up in, and it was acceptable. And so I found that this void within me that I had no idea how to cope with, all of my emotions, that drinking or being around other people who used felt normal and felt safe. And it filled that void. And so, like, I took that opportunity when I was around friends, and when I was like 14, that was my exposure in high school, and hanging out with people that were older than me, that it was okay, to drink at social functions and stay the night at someone's house and drink there, and smoke pot. And, I preferred to smoke pot because I could smoke and go home later, whereas when I drank, I was pretty much having to stay the night somewhere. And I found comfort in that. It took away the feeling of anxiety and inadequacy and maybe discomfort. And so I continued doing what worked. I also realized that, like, hanging out with other people was easier to do when there were alcohol or drugs involved, because those other people wanted to use like I did, and I wanted to be around other people and have a sense of belonging, and I wanted to be around alcohol and drugs because it felt good. And so I created this like perfect storm where my sense of accepting with other people, acceptance, was through using. And so I got a job, and I started working, and I got a car, and I started paying for my own gas, and I realized there was freedom in that. And so I worked my tail off so I could continue doing what I liked doing, and that was hanging out with other people who were using. And looking back, I can see this evolution of where I had a set of friends, but I started drinking and using too much for them, that they kind of fell to the wayside, and I picked up this new crew of friends. And then that crew of friends wasn't up to par of what I was doing at that point in time and the substances I was using at that point in time, and I kind of kicked them to the side and went with this other group of people. And what I realized looking back is that I did not care about other people. I didn't care about their well-being. I didn't care about their feelings. I had like this tunnel vision where all that mattered was me and what I needed, that void that I had, and filling that void, and feeling all right. And that was by like hanging out with other people and using and hooking up with guys and whatever that looked like. And I was very manipulative, very selfish and self-seeking. I was like a tornado, I think is a good analogy. I was like a tornado. I was just ripping through people's lives, and I didn't care. I couldn't care. It wasn't that I didn't want to care. I had been programmed as a young child that what other people think about you is important, but I didn't care, and I couldn't care. And eventually what ended up happening was like this path I was on. I got further and further away from like these instilled morals that I had, or values that I thought I had. And people say this all the time, that like, I did things in active addiction that I would never have dreamed of doing, or there were things I did that I'm extremely embarrassed by, or brought about shame or guilt. And oh my gosh, so true. Like, there were things that I would do because I was in this tunnel vision of all I cared about was myself and what I needed at that point in time. And I lost friends because of that. I lost family because of that. I lost touch with a lot of really, really cool people. And I can remember at one period in a time where I woke up in the morning surrounded by a bunch of people, and I had no idea what had happened, like from 7 o'clock on the night before, but I'm sure I was awake for it, just not coherent. And I remember waking up and feeling extremely restless. And the only thing I can equate that to is like the feeling of what it might feel like to be a wild animal stuck in a cage where you can't get out. And I remember my heart beating super fast, and I knew I had to work that day, but I knew I had to get off. I had to call off somehow. And I knew I had done things the night before that wasn't good, but I didn't want to feel that either. And so I had created this chaos within my own life that I couldn't sit with. I had to run from it. And so I'd wake up in the morning with extreme guilt and shame, with no idea about what it was tied to. And I had to stuff it, and I had to fix it, and I had to go forward. And so I just keep using. And it was like this vicious cycle that I had gotten stuck in. And, I had tried to build myself up, when I started working, and I had slowly lost all of those things. I was at this point in time where I was restless, and any free moment I had to fill it with using. And so I guess that brings me to what happened. June 23rd, 2009, I woke up in a hospital, and vague recollection of what had happened the night before. I was in this really odd room by myself with like nothing in it but a bed. And I walk out in this lobby and start having bits and pieces coming back to myself about like what had happened the night before. And I realized that I had gotten an OVI the night before, and I was in a psych unit. I didn't know where. I was calling people. I was panicking, like that feeling of being a caged animal. Like I just said, can I get a phone? I need to call people. And everybody that I called, nobody answered the phone. And I remember thinking, like, these are the people I was out with last night. These were my friends, or so I thought. Nobody answered the phone. So I went back in my room, and I started thinking about what had happened and how I got there. And I had recollection, of a police officer that had arrested me that night, and how he had, like, just, you could tell he was just kind of like a loss for words. Like, he'd seen me multiple times. I'd had multiple charges at this point in time, all drug or alcohol related. And he was just kind of like shaking his head. And I can remember him saying, hey, you can cuff her in the front. She's not going to do anything. And I remember thinking, as I processed through like what had happened the night before, that I had no emotion. I couldn't feel anything. Like I knew I should have remorse, and I knew I should feel guilt, and I knew what I did was wrong, and I knew that in the eyes of my family or whoever that like this was not okay. I couldn't feel anything. And then I realized like how I had ended up in the psych unit was because I had tried to slit my wrists. And I had done that because I couldn't feel anything, and I wanted to feel alive. Like I wanted to feel something. It wasn't because I wanted to die. I felt helpless. But I didn't want to die. I just wanted to feel something and know I was still alive. Because I've been numb for so long, and it didn't work. And I remember getting frustrated and getting angry, and that's when my family came in and found what was going on and took me to the hospital. And I'm forever grateful for that. Because without that, I would have never gotten clean. So, I remember walking up to this lady and at the front desk and saying, hey, I need a big book. Where would that have come from? That wasn't my thinking. I had gone to treatment before, and I faked it. I stayed sober for like 90 some days, I graduated IOP. I did what was expected of me because, like I like to accomplish things and I like to tell people I can do it and look good on the outside, but inside I was crumbling and I wasn't really working on myself. And so someone had taken me to an AA meeting in treatment. And so I thought, well, that's what I'm supposed to do. And when I was laying in my bed trying to figure out, well, like what happened and putting the puzzle pieces together and thinking like, what the hell am I supposed to do? I had this thought, and it was loud and it was clear, and it was like, get a big book. And that wasn't me. I wouldn't have thought of that, nor did I want that. Like I was pacing. I was ready to get out. I had to find a solution. Like I got to get out. I got to find my car. Like whose car was I in when I got pulled over? Where is that now? Like where's my shoes? I didn't know. I was like in this panic mode, but it was a calm voice, and it said, you need a big book. So I asked for it, and the lady at the nurse's desk, I remember her just kind of looking at me and being like, you mean a Bible? And clueless. And I was like, no, I need a big book. And I was starting to get frustrated, and she said, well, I'll do my best. I'll look around. And like a whole day had gone by, and I hadn't gotten one. And God did this for me because he knew I wouldn't reach out to anyone who could truly help me if I wasn't put in a position where I had to. So I called my mom, who was in recovery, and I said, hey, I need a big book. And she didn't come visit, but she dropped one off to me. And I opened it, and I started reading it. And that was my first experience of God. In recovery. I had grown up around God in church, but I didn't know who he was. Like I did it because it was what was expected of me, and I was supposed to do it, and I had to look good for the family. You go to church on Sunday, so your great aunt and everybody knows that you're going to church. I didn't go for me. So I had experience with God, but I didn't know how God worked. I had no clue, like, how to rely on God. So when I heard that day, I followed that direction, and I got that big book. And the day I got out of the psych unit, my mom was there to pick me up, and she said, what are you going to do? And I said, I want to go to a meeting. And from that day forward, I kept going to a meeting. The first few meetings I went to, I don't remember at all. It's like a fog. And I'm sure it was weeks in recovery because I was in the hospital for 3 days. Weeks in recovery before I actually remember like sitting in a meeting and hearing what people were saying. I had to be like held still for a while. I had no car, obviously. I had no license anymore. I had court. I had lots of things that were kind of over my head, but this time I wasn't doing it for other people. What worked for me is that I was doing it for me, and I was taking direction from my higher power. And I didn't realize it was my higher power till I got in the rooms of 12 steps, and people started explaining what their spiritual experience was. And I thought, that was it. That's like what I experienced in the hospital. And like that's what I experienced when I met people in 12-step meetings, and they were like telling me their story, and they said things that keyed with certain things that I was feeling. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is it. This is God. Like this is what I've been missing. And, like I had this big void, like I was saying before, and God started to fill that with other people, but that wasn't enough for me. So I couldn't just fill that void with God and with 12 steps. Because I was still so dysfunctional. Like, I would like to say as soon as I got in recovery, I stopped using people, but I didn't. I was still extremely selfish for a while. I would get in quick relationships and just use that guy for what I needed. I would have friendships, but it was only because of certain things that I needed out of that friendship. And a lot of that relied on having somebody who could drive me around, somebody who could fill that hole, that void within me. But I kept going to meetings. Like somebody told me in a 12-step meeting, go to 90 meetings in 90 days. And that was black and white enough for me that I had no room for interpretation. Like 90 meetings in 90 days, I can do this. Luckily, I had family that supported me and were willing to take me there and from. So I made it to 93 meetings in 90 days because, I'm an overachiever. And I heard a lot of really important things in those meetings that stuck with me and still stick with me to this day. And I made it through that period of time with court. I had to go to jail sober. I was probably 3 months sober at the time that I had to serve my jail time. And I remember being really uncomfortable because I was supposed to be the maid of honor of my sister's wedding. And I didn't know how I was going to pull off going to jail and being in her wedding because I cared now. Like, I cared about her well-being and, like, how she would feel if I didn't show up. I didn't care about that stuff before, And, like, I started to get, like, a sense of humility back to me that I'm sure I had at some point in time. I just don't remember. And like, I could be there for other people because that mattered now. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, I have to go to jail for 3 days and it's such an inconvenience. It was like, I can't believe I might miss my sister's wedding for this. But I did it. God worked in my life. I kept putting my foot forward and doing what was suggested to me by other people in recovery. And I kept doing what was expected. So, like, I had fines. I worked my butt off. I would work doubles so I didn't have to worry about transportation as much. And I would put that money towards my fines. I would put it towards my reinstatement fee. I would put it towards my blow and go that luckily I was able to get to drive back and forth to work eventually. And I started doing my community service. And so I started knocking out the things that were expected of me because I cared now about what other people needed and their feelings and their needs. Like, at the time of driving under the influence, I did not think about I was stealing somebody else's car. I didn't think about that I was putting someone else's life in danger by being in the passenger seat. I didn't think about possibly putting other people's lives in danger by driving down the road, swerving all over the place. Like, I didn't care. All I cared about was I was left at the bar after lights came on and I didn't have a ride home. That's all that I cared about. Now I cared about I have to pay back my costs because it's my responsibility because I did this thing. I had a sense of dignity again. Not a lot, but I had a sense of dignity again and responsibility and integrity that I did not have before. And I wasn't doing it because I wanted other people to see it. I think that was key. Like, I wasn't proving myself to my family. Eventually, my family just saw the outcomes of recovery in my life. Like, I wasn't begging people to trust me again. I just did what was expected of me, and somehow they started trusting me. And so the 12-step program that I worked the steps. I got a sponsor, and the first sponsor I got, she fit what I needed at that point in time because I was a hot mess. And I needed a sponsor who was sort of a hot mess. And we worked through steps 1 through 3. And then I realized I needed a new sponsor who I could trust to go through step 4, 5, and 6 with, who I knew wasn't going to spill the beans to the other people in recovery about what I had done and what I had been through. Because step 4 was about inventorying everything that I had ever done wrong, that I could remember, at least. Step 5 was about telling it to somebody else. And I was good at stuffing my feelings and stuffing what I had done and keeping a good face on and moving forward and acting like nothing had happened. And there was a lot of baggage that I was carrying that I couldn't just trust anyone. And luckily, I found somebody who was willing to do that I felt like I could trust. And she had a sponsor herself. And so we all got together and did steps 4, 5, and 6 together. And I remember how freeing it was to sit down. And I was so embarrassed. I was full of shame and guilt reading all of this stuff off. And I remember reading one that I was so embarrassed by that I still have only told one other person about in my entire life. And her just kind of looking at me and cocking her head to the side and saying, "Oh my gosh, I have that on my list too." that was God for me. So I needed that moment of clarity to know I'm not alone. And the stuff that I've done, there's so many other people out there that have done it too. And I could get through it. And I shared it with her, and she shared hers with me. And we both burnt them afterwards so nobody could see them, and got rid of it. And I remember feeling like this weight off my chest that I can actually be okay with this right now. Like, I can tell God about this now. And so the next steps for me was to make a list of all those people that I had harmed and try to make amends to them whenever possible. And see, because I don't remember everything from active addiction, there was a lot that, like, I don't know if I chose to block out or if it was because I was in a blackout and I don't remember, but there was a lot that I didn't see. And so I made amends to the people that I knew I had harmed. But there were times in my recovery, one specifically, I was 7 years clean at this point in time. I made a comment on Facebook, singing along. You know, somebody posts a lyric in a song, and then somebody else posts like the next line in the song, and somebody else posts the next one, and you're like singing along with them, and it was like a good song, happy song, and I thought there was no harm in that. And this person hopped on, and I had harmed her in my past, and I didn't know. And she hopped on and said, I remember this, and laid it all out on the line in a public fashion, man, and it knocked me. And I remember thinking, holy hell, I don't remember this at all. Is she making this up? But what the program had taught me was that I need to make my amends whenever possible, except when to do so would injure someone or others. And I took that opportunity to say, I apologize. I had no idea I hurt you. I live a different life now. If this was me today, that would never happen. I'm sorry for any hurt I caused you. And then I took a Facebook hiatus. But I think what the program taught me is that it's not a one-time thing. You just don't apologize to those 5 people and then you move on in life. No, like there are times that pop up in my life that I know I did wrong and I need to apologize for that. And, you know, I went on through the rest of the 12 steps with my sponsor at the time. And step 10, I have to do daily. I have to take a daily inventory and determine, was there anything I did throughout the day that was selfish and self-seeking? Was there anything I did throughout the day that harmed someone else? Because I will take that and internalize it and shove it down, and it will grow and it will fester, and I will have a resentment. Before you know it, I will be beating myself up, and I will be in a terrible place. And so I learned to do step 10 every day when I can remember. I'm not perfect by any means. And step 11 and 12, I really try to have daily conscious contact with my higher power. And I try to carry that on to other people and share my story and share my experience, strength, and hope in everything that I do. And so God showed me at that point in time that I needed a new sponsor because I had really outgrown the one that I was with. And I was at a new point in my life where I was starting to uncover a lot of this baggage that had happened when I was younger, and I didn't know how to process it. And I needed somebody who knew what I was experiencing at that point in time. And so I got a new sponsor, and I started setting goals for myself. I had dropped out of college when I was in active use, and I had to prove myself back into getting back into college. I had to write the dean and explain what had happened and why things were different now and why they should take me back. I shouldn't have a handout to anybody. I threw that away, and luckily they took me back. And I graduated with my bachelor's degree. I did another certificate in addiction studies. And I realized this is what I want to do. I want to work with people who struggle with addiction, because at that point in time, I had multiple years under my belt in recovery, and I wanted to spread that knowledge. And so what I did was I just looked up online, like, what is the highest certificate that I can get? And I'm going to shoot for that because I have no idea what else to do with my life. And so I found that, and I started taking the steps forward. And so God gifted me with amazing opportunities to get back into college, to prove myself in my grades. That way I could make it into grad school. That way I could graduate. You know, there were times in my life that I had chose to go back to school full time and not work. And I thought, how are we going to make it? How are we going to financially make it through this? And I believe that because I was doing the right thing and my heart was in a good place, I had opportunities pop up in front of me because I was following the path that was laid in front of me and I wasn't creating more harm. And so there was a time that I received this check in the mail. I didn't know the previous employer I was working for had been putting money into a 401k. We were literally at this point in time where my fiance or husband at that point in time, we were trying to decide how we were going to pay the bills. And this check comes in the mail out of nowhere that I didn't even know had existed. And it was enough to get us by. Those moments are God working in my life because I have faith. I know that if I keep doing the next right thing and I keep trying to help others and I'm not creating more harm in others' lives or my life, and I keep a conscious contact with God, I know doors will open. They always do. In my past 12 plus years in recovery, there have been so many doors that have opened that I can only say, but God has done this. And I think sometimes it happens financially because that's what I notice the most. There was a time my husband and I were trying to buy a house, and the certain type of loan that we were going for was no longer going to work for the type of house we wanted, and there was a certain amount of a down payment we needed, and we just kept going through the motions and trying to do what was right, but we knew we didn't have this money in the bank account, and then all of a sudden, his work says, you're getting a profit-sharing check, and it's for this dollar amount, which was almost the exact amount that we needed for our down payment. That's when I know that I'm going down the right path, that God continually shows me, you're supposed to be here. You're supposed to be doing this. Oftentimes I'll be praying about something. I try to get up in the mornings and go into a quiet space in my house before my kids wake up and my husband's home. And I try to go in there and I do a little bit of meditation and reading, and I'll be praying about something. God, help me see what I'm supposed to see. Help me, see what next steps I'm supposed to take or the direction I'm supposed to be going. Or sometimes something's like really rocky that I'm going through and I have no clue how I'm going to get out of it. And then I'll get a call from someone saying, here's a new job opportunity for you. Or there will be an opportunity with family. I'll be stressing about the holiday, stressing about Thanksgiving. And then the family calls and says, I think we're going to cancel this year because COVID's too chaotic. And like these blessings come about for me that I don't see, and I don't try to control the situation anymore. Like I still have moments in time and today in recovery where I feel like a caged animal. Like there are triggers for me that will set me back and make me revert to old behaviors that I know where they come from. But I know them now. Like I see them. In active addiction, I had tunnel vision and I didn't care about anybody else. Now I can see others and I can see how my life impacts them. And I don't put everybody's needs before my own. Don't get me wrong, my recovery is number one, and it has to be number one. My sanity, my well-being has to be number one. But others' needs are important too. And when I make a decision now, I talk to my husband about it. I think about how it's going to impact my kids. I think about the domino effect and I play that tape forward. I learned so many really, really useful tools in the short time I was in treatment before I ever got into recovery. I've learned so many amazing tools from being in 12-step rooms, learning from other people who have experience. But don't get me wrong, I still go to therapy. There have been times in my life that things have gotten a bit chaotic, and I recognize that I'm reverting back to that old selfish, self-seeking me that's really still in there if I let it. And I reach out into therapy and I process through it. And I recognize that there's things that have happened when I was much younger that have manifested themselves into unhealthy things in my life today. And I wouldn't see those if I wasn't willing to pull back one layer and work on it, and pull back another layer and work on that. And usually I see it in different areas of my life, in different relationships of my life. And when I see things pop up in multiple different areas, that's my cue. Something's up. If I'm noticing that one person's driving me crazy, that's one thing. But if I'm noticing that one person's driving me crazy, and my husband and my mom and somebody, something's wrong with me. And I need to look at what that is. I do a lot of journaling today. That helps me a lot to kind of get things on paper, because my head flies like a lot. My thoughts fly. I talk to other people. COVID really threw me for a loop. A lot of in-person stuff that I was used to doing, I can no longer do. And I isolated, and isolation isn't good for me. And it caused me to kind of sit back a little bit and look at my values and look at my morals again, and adjust and reach out intentionally for help. Today I surround myself with people that will call me on my shit. When I was in active use, I would avoid the people that would call me out, because I didn't want to look at it. Like, I knew underlying that what I was doing wasn't right. And I knew it didn't jive with everybody else, and so I'd avoid those people. But today I purposefully submit myself in front of other people, because I know they'll hold me accountable. I don't have alcohol or drugs in my life, in my house. One thing that I had to learn for myself when I was learning to love myself in early recovery was that I can't have alcohol or drugs in my close environment anymore. I grew up with it. It was too chaotic. I learned how to live in that, and I function well in that environment, and I don't want to anymore. And so I don't want to be tempted. I don't want to have a bad day and realize something's there for me. So my boyfriend at the time, I had explained to him, I guess I was about 2 years clean at this point in time. We'd been together for about 6 months, and I said, hey, things are getting kind of like legit between us, and I can't be with you if you're going to drink anymore. And he chose to stop, because he didn't have what I had. He chose to stop, and he continued on in our relationship. We got engaged, we got married, we're still married today, and he doesn't drink or use. I don't know what that's like to be selfless to that extent. I admire him for that. But I had to make that decision, and I had to understand that I can't have it in my safe bubble, because this is my safety, this is my security, and this is where I find God and my higher power. And if I have any opportunity on a bad day, I'll take it. I don't want to take it. So I don't put myself in risky situations. I learned that if I can be the driver, I have a get out of jail free card. Like, I can leave, I can make up an excuse, I can go home early. If things are getting a little uncomfortable at family events or wherever, I can go. I've learned tips and tricks like that from other people in recovery who shared with me how they made it through the holidays, how they made it through functions that usually were triggering for me. And so today I have an amazing husband, beautiful and amazing children. I promised myself that I would pass on the knowledge I have to my kids. And it's so important to me that they know at least a little bit about what I went through, because I don't want them to think like that nobody uses drugs and nobody drinks. But I want them to know that that's not normal, and it's not healthy, and it causes trauma, and it's not good. And so I want them to realize that they have emotions and how to work through them. And part of my growth is not just for me. Part of my growth is for my kids, because I want to learn these coping skills and these opportunities for myself that I can pass those on to them. And so when they're feeling that void in their life, they don't have to use drugs. They don't have to use other people to fill those voids. And I take it day by day, and I try to be rigorously honest in everything I do, sometimes to a downfall. But I don't have a poker face anymore. I try to be as authentic as I can in all rooms, because I had to go to the opposite end of the spectrum to be extremely honest, and I don't want to hide anything from people anymore. And today I want to give back to other people. I want to share. I share by telling my story. I share by helping other people. You know, when I'm downtown and I'm stopped at the stoplight and there's somebody flying a sign, like, I don't need to know all of their story. And it could very well involve drugs and alcohol, but I'm not high and mighty. I offer them what I have in my car, a granola bar, a water, a poncho, whatever it is. I tell them have a good day, because they are humans too, and you know, they've got a life. And I model that to my kids. And I help them see that just because I don't live that life anymore doesn't mean I'm any better than anyone else. And I want to give back. I try to share. My life has been a complete 180, and I have been blessed with so many things in my life that I can't keep those all to myself. And I pray that people understand that it's not like people choose to have addiction. And it's not like people choose and want to hurt other people. But if anybody's like me, I couldn't see what I was doing. I literally could not see the havoc that I was wreaking on other people. I had that tunnel vision. Couldn't see a way out. You could say, Jess, stop using. That was literally like a foreign language to me. I couldn't see that possibility. I hope somebody who's watching this can take that away, that it's not like your loved one wants to hurt you. It's not like your loved one is choosing drugs over you. That's literally all they see. And I hope for the people that are watching that are still struggling, who are still using or thinking about using, I hear that cliche, like, my worst day in recovery is still better than my best day in active addiction. And that is so true, because my miserable moments today are not even close to what I thought was a good day in active use. Because I can wake up in the morning and I can know the things that I've done the day before, and I can have peace with myself and with other people, and I can have a sense of confidence. And it doesn't happen overnight. It happens with work, by putting in the effort and continually being willing to look at it and being aware of it, being willing to grow through it. But it does get better. It does get a lot better. And I have hope. I know that my life will continue getting better, and I'm going to continue learning new things. And I'm excited. You know, there's days that I wake up still and I'm a little unhappy that my alarm went off. But for the most part, I'm excited about what tomorrow brings and the next day. And I wake up grateful for today. And I watch the sunrise. I watch the leaves change color now. There were times that I don't even remember what season it was, and if the leaves even fell off, I could care less. But now I enjoy it. And I want to share those moments with other people. And I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'm grateful to share my story, and I hope it can impact other people. Thank you.